Welcome back. I'm Ann Hayes, aka Mama G, where I empower especially twin flames through sacred sexuality to become fiercely fulfilled. And I'm the founder of Fiercely Fulfilled Feminine. So, what I'd like to get into today is to talk about the two most common attachment styles within the twin flame community. Now, what is an attachment style? It's how you interact and relate to others, especially romantic partners. Now, in the twin flame community, the way a lot of guides, twin flame guides, they'll talk about the spiritual aspect of the energy and the dynamic of the energy. And for example, words, runner and chaser are used, push pull energy. And yet, I would like to come in with a more holistic approach where I mention the neurobiology, the psychology, and even the behavioral psychology in discussing these two very common attachment styles to help give you a deeper understanding and a more holistic understanding. I'm looking at love avoidant and love addicted. So, yes, there's something known as love addiction, which I had no idea about on this journey. So, if you're especially divine feminine, and you're looking at your divine masculine and they look like they have some kind of addiction, they drink too much, they're doing drugs, whatever it is, they're sleeping around, you have an equally intense addiction as well. And it may, in fact, be a love addiction. It could be a sugar addiction. It could be a relationship addiction. It could be any number of addictions. Remember, you completely mirror each other. I just want to put that in there. So I'm going to share these attachment styles. Neither one of them are healthy, and they can generate an ongoing cycle of toxic relationships. The beauty of the twin flame connection is that it has been divinely templated, I believe, to ensure that this cycle of toxic relationship ends for good. And you can thank your divine counterpart for that. Okay, let's get into this. So, first of all, neurologically, we are programmed for connection. Connection, which is why we have something, for example, like oxytocin, which is a feel-good hormone released when a mother's breastfeeding her baby, her child, when you engage in genuine conversations, deep spiritual conversations, engaging, you're laughing, whenever you're connecting with others, friends, family, hugging, smiling, embracing, sharing jokes, you are releasing feel-good hormones. And so you want more of that because we are designed to connect. And so what happens, unfortunately, is that especially twin flames, I guarantee you, if you're a twin flame and you're on a twin flame journey, that you have experienced a deeper level of trauma than the average person. We all experience trauma, but perhaps a deeper level of trauma. And because of that trauma, it has created a core emotional wound, perhaps abandonment or rejection, and that is being expressed in the way that you live your life, in the way that you interact with others, and the way your desires show up. So let's talk about that. You see, if we are programmed for connection, we want the feel good hormones that go with that. We're going to do whatever we can to try to find that connection, or at least the feel good hormones. Now, what happens as a child, if that bonding doesn't take place, okay, for example, food, shelter, clothing, water, food, right? Those are all necessities, right? Yet there's one more need that we all have that is even more powerful than all of those. And it's this: love. Love. So if for some reason along your journey and as a child, if for some reason you felt abandoned or rejected, you may have got the message that you weren't loved, that you weren't worthy of love, that you weren't enough, that you weren't good enough, that you didn't matter. You were insignificant. And there are a number of different reasons why this might have shown up. So for example, if a dad left, you were 4 years old and your dad left and never came back. Okay, what did I do wrong? Why did dad leave? It must be because of me. I'm not worthy of being loved. I'm not good enough. I don't matter, because otherwise he would have stayed. Or in my situation, it's this is how unusual it can be. I mean, I had obviously abuse as well, but it as a baby, I was born with a twin sister. I was on the smaller end. And at that time, if you were beneath 5 pounds, underneath 5 pounds, you had to stay in the hospital, put on weight. So I stayed in the hospital an extra week by myself. Parents didn't stick around. They all went home, including my twin sister. And I was left at the hospital by myself. First abandonment moon right there, right out the gate. Okay. And obviously, if you are, the real obvious ones are being physically abused, physically, um, sexually abused, being neglected, okay, not being provided for. Those are pretty obvious, and yet we tend to minimize because there are others as well. Loss of a parent, loss of close friend, like just loss in general. There's just a lot of different ways that trauma comes out of events that make us feel the opposite of feeling good. And so as humans, we want to feel good because it feels good to feel good. So what we will tend to do is we will look for ways to compensate. We might look for substances. We might, develop a sugar addiction, a shopping addiction, a gambling addiction, a sex addiction, an alcohol addiction, a drug addiction, addiction to relationships. All kinds of addictions to try to get that feel good hormone to get that dopamine to kick in, give ourselves a dope hit, so to speak. So I'm kind of going at it, but with all that being said, it's going to all come into play here. So let's look at the love avoidant and the love addict and how they show up and why they show up in the way that they do and what tends to be the childhood circumstances around that. And I think it's really going to help you to more truly understand what's going on in your dynamic with your divine counterpart. So before I dive in further, I'd like to share that the divine masculine tends to be the love avoidant. The divine feminine tends to be the love addicted. So let's start with the love avoidant. The love avoidant is typically someone in childhood who was enmeshed with one of their parents. In other words, it was almost like they became the emotional support or partner for their parent. They were meeting their emotional needs. They were taking care of other needs, almost as if they were their parent's partner. Maybe the dad left or the mom left or a single parent. There was one of the parents died. Perhaps one of the parents, when the parent is into substance abuse, and so they may need help. Let's get you off the couch, or let's get you a blanket. Let me cook dinner tonight. Let me run to the store. So the love avoidant is typically someone as a child who's had to take on a lot of extra responsibilities. So they're in the habit of taking care of others' needs. Now, here's the other caveat. We are built for survival. And so as children, we are 100% completely dependent on our parents. So we will do whatever we need to do or believe we need to do in order to ensure that we have them around to help to continue to provide shelter, food, water, clothing, whatever it might be, and hopefully love as well. We don't want to be abandoned. We want to avoid that at all costs because being abandoned means I could die or you could die. Okay. So that's why somebody's like, even like it's, like a child feels like, oh, this is too much. But yet they do it because they feel like if they do that, there's no chance that they can be abandoned. They're going to get the love that they need. They're going to get what they need. So they do it. Except what happens as they love avoidant grows into adulthood or teenagehood, whatever, adolescence, whatever it might be, they realize that, okay, unconsciously, or actually unconsciously, typically, they are attracting those partners into their life who are needy, that match the neediness of the parent that they provided for. And so what happens is, oh, here's somebody here. I can take care of their needs. By taking care of their needs, it means I have value, I have worth. They need me, so they won't abandon me. They're going to love me, and I'm good to go. Except what happens over a period of time is those need that the love avoidant becomes resentful, even angry. They feel suffocated. They can't breathe. Like this is too much, like because they're not taking care of their own needs. And so what will happen typically is they will seek that intensity, intensity outside of the relationship. They may start to have affairs. They will overwork to avoid coming home and dealing with that feeling like I can't breathe. They might start using substances. There are a lot of different ways that they will escape and avoid the intensity of the connection, the relationship that makes it feel like they can't breathe. As much as they want that love, it's like, oh, this doesn't feel good. The love, now let's look at and that's typically divine masculine, which is why they might be termed the runner, the avoider. And I'm going to get to the core wound, which is exactly the same in a minute. Okay, remember, I identify the runner as the protector of the connection, coming from a spiritual, elevated perspective. I shared that in the last video. Okay, because there tends to be stigma around running and chasing. Yeah, we look at the energy, but let's look at the psychology behind it as well and the shared core wound. Remember, they're mirroring each other. So the love addict is typically a child who didn't quite get her emotional needs yet. There was often neglect or just not getting enough attention and not getting their needs met when they truly needed to have their needs met. So instead of being like the love avoidant where the parent is pulling them in and they're completely enmeshed with the parent, it's the opposite for the love addict. It's like, oh, am I loved? They feel abandoned, they feel rejected. And this is often the divine feminine. What can I do to get love? What can I do to get somebody's attention? It could be maybe it's just a big family. Perhaps there's a mother with mental illness. Perhaps there's a dad who's working too much, is just isn't around. There could, like I said, it could be sexual abuse, physical abuse, all kinds of things going on that make this child feel like, wow, I'm not loved. Why can't somebody just give me some attention? Why can't somebody tell me they love me? Why don't I get a hug? Feeling rejected. That I was from a big family, you know, and I mean, yes, I dealt with sexual trauma as well. I dealt with ET abduction, ritualistic abuse. And yet I believe my mother was depressed. We had a big family. There was a lot going on. It was overwhelming. We struggled financially. My father was very anxious and angry a lot. And it just was like I was screaming for help. And yet it was just kind of like, oh, we don't got time for you right now. And it wasn't intentional. I love my parents, but the outcome is the same, real or perceived, the same. So for me personally, because I identify as a recovering love addict. I'm a divine feminine, my core overall dominant core frequency. And for me, I didn't feel like I got enough attention. It just wasn't enough to go around. There's a sense of overwhelm. So I sought for it in others. And so I was that love addict. I was like, oh, like I just always felt like I needed a relationship. I already need somebody else to define me. And I got myself lost in others. I became that people pleaser. I was taking care of everybody else's needs because my needs weren't being taken care of. So let me just try to take care of my needs by taking care of everybody else's needs. That's what the love addict tends to do. And that's just as unhealthy. So that's that's the person, the love addict is like, I need you to tell me I'm beautiful. I need you to tell me you love me. I need you to send me flowers and text messages. And it's that dopamine, that dope hit. Let me get into a relationship. And for the love addict, it's different. The love addict is less likely someone who's going to like sleep around. They're going to be loyal. Typically, the love addict, at least initially, because they're dependent on that relationship to meet their needs, whether it's financial, emotional, whatever. They're going to be dependent on that relationship. So they will do everything they can to make sure that there's stability in that relationship. They don't want to rock that boat. So oftentimes the love addict will do whatever to kind of please the situation. And they can be very manipulative without being consciously aware, whereas the love avoidant can be actually seductive. In other words, not in a way that we would typically think, but in other words, we'll make it as if they are available, but they're really not. Like, let me let you get your number. Let's get out. Let's go out. Let's do this. Let's do that. Might even marry you, okay? And yet they're not emotionally available. Neither the love avoidant or the love addict are truly emotionally available. They have a fear of true intimacy. Remember, intimacy is into me, you see. Everything. Everything. Okay. So the core wound for both the love avoidant and the love addict is the core wound of abandonment and also rejection, particularly with the love addict, who's typically the divine feminine. So you can see where that push pull energy dynamic comes into play, and why it aligns in that way. It's just that the trauma has unfolded a little bit differently for each counterpart, and it has created an attachment style where actually when you bring those attachment styles together, oh, there's a very powerful attraction there that's coming from trauma, and that becomes a trauma bond. The beauty, however, with the twin flame connection is that somehow it's been divinely templated in, is that this time you are going to end that toxic relationship cycle for good. No more trauma bonding. No more trauma bonding. It's like the divine masculine says, I've had enough. Divine feminine says, I've had enough. It's time to do the healing. It's time to do the work. Now, here's the deal though. And I'm going to get back to divine masculine. We'll talk a little bit of divine masculine and divine feminine. I do hope that helps you by describing those two attachment styles and how they tend to align with the divine counterparts. To add to that, I like to get a little metaphorical, okay, is that the divine masculine tends to be the one who, well, first of all, divine masculine is going to heal externally through relationship situations and events. Divine masculine, who's often a love avoidant, will say to themselves, wow, I don't get my needs met, so I'm just going to take care of my own needs. I'm going to prove I have value. I'm going to prove I have worth. They will go out there and become falsely empowered. What does that mean to become falsely empowered? They will be an overachiever. They will overwork to seek that external validation. Like, look at me, look at what I can do. And it becomes this inflated ego. And I'm not making it good or bad. I'm just sharing that because we're going to get to the divine feminine in a minute. Okay. We're going to get to divine feminine in a minute. And what happens at some point is that like a balloon, it's going to keep expanding, inflating, and boom, it pops. It cannot sustain itself. And that's when the divine masculine has to come back and say, okay, what do I do now? My life's a mess. I need to do something different. Something needs to change. Because falsely empowered is, oh, wow, look at me. Okay, it depends on where it's coming from. Where is the success coming from? Where is the money coming from? Where are these awards coming from? You know, what is the intention behind it? What is the need behind it? Okay, if it's a trauma response or response to trauma, uber independence without the need for anybody or anything, that's not a healthy response. Okay, so I look at it as divine masculine, falsely empowered, inflated ego may look like super successful on the outside. Okay, because the divine masculine is repressing emotions, becoming distracted in a lot of different ways. It can show up in a lot of different ways, overachiever. Whereas the divine feminine, on the other end of it, is that deflated balloon. No life force energy, like boom, flat, depressed, typically. No life force energy, disempowered, underachiever, coming from the same core wound, and along with that core wound of abandonment comes shame. And I'm not going to get into where that shame is coming from, but shame. And here's the interesting aspect when it comes to divine feminine and divine masculine. There's a core of shame that divine masculine isn't as in touch with because of the inflated ego They have a lot more to do to get back to that core of shame and begin to heal it. It's just how it is. Whereas the divine feminine tends to be a lot close to that core of shame. Think about it. Just that flat balloon. I don't mean to laugh. It just is what it is. You gotta laugh about it, right? At some point, boom, they're like pressed right on top of that core of shame. Whereas there's the distraction and the false empowerment with the divine masculine. Eventually, once it deflates, it's like, okay, now they can tap into that core of shame. So typically it may take the divine masculine a little bit longer to recognize and realize what's going on in their life that is not working well, that is not functioning in a healthy way. So there's no right or wrong. It's just different responses to the way that the trauma showed up, different expressions, and it actually has a very powerful energetic aspect to how divine counterparts come together. So, like I said, the beauty of the love avoidant and the love addict is that when they come together as twin flames, divine counterparts, they are ready to break that trauma bond. Because trauma bonding does not sustain relationships. Trauma bonding involves relationships full of conflict. And what divine counterparts and twin flames have signed up for, I believe, is relationships full of harmony, peace, awareness, mutual respect, devotion, and loyalty. It doesn't mean it's perfect. And yet it becomes responsive. It becomes where each counterpart becomes self-responsibility and takes ownership versus reactive. Big, big difference. And the counterparts grow together. So eventually, when enough healing has been done, and there's a time where there's a relationship that's able to sustain itself, the twin flames will either come into physical reunion, or it could be another divine partner or divine love. The key is that it's divine in nature. And that's the beauty of this whole thing. So that's love avoidant, the love addict. I hope that helps. You have a beautiful day. Any questions, like I said, please drop those kindly in the comments. Any feedback that you may have, I would love if you could subscribe, like this video, because that just gets other people to come in and show up and perhaps see videos like this that have a little bit more of a holistic approach to help you to better understand this journey and create greater peace on the journey. So me personally, again, I do one-on-one coaching. I have online programs. I help especially twin flames through speaking as well in my music. So I highly encourage you to get on board. At any rate, you have a beautiful day, wherever you are, evening, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.